You're about to hear the personal story of one of our friends, Molly, Winters-Carie, and the death of her husband, Gregg Winters, killed in the line of duty in 1990. Get ready for a very powerful story and how God helped her turn tragedy into triumph. Well, hello, everybody. Here we are for another great Remnant Revealed. Man, we've been all over the country, flying in and out of places, out of the country, doing a lot of great work and helping cops all over the planet, literally.
Literally.
And it's a great day. We have a great guest with us today in the podcast room. But before we introduce her and get going on that, Rick, I have a little gift for you.
For me?
Yeah, for you. Yeah, my
Very
friend.
nice.
I know how much you love giving little wooden crosses out.
I've given a few of those out.
So I thought, where better to find some little wooden crosses than close to the place where the original cross was put and our Savior was put on it.
Yeah.
And then to the place of his birth.
Very nice.
And so this is olive wood from Bethlehem, and olive wood crosses. And I thought you might like these.
Oh, wow. Absolutely.
How about that, man?
Yeah, I'll put these to good use. Be handing these out as well. Very nice.
So
Thank you for that.
That is olive wood from Bethlehem. It is, if you ever want to buy something of olive wood, you want to get it from Bethlehem, because I've been there 14 times in like 30 years, and that's the place to buy any kind of olive wood Last Supper settings, or, people like to buy other religious articles, but it's just the best.
So you just got back from Israel.
Just got back.
You'd shared before that you were looking at going over there, so you did a trip over there.
Yep.
And took some folks over with you, correct?
We had 52 pilgrims, I like to call them.
That's amazing.
And went to a lot of the holy sites and all through Jerusalem. And we were in Nazareth and Bethlehem, which you can't always get to Bethlehem.
Okay.
Sometimes they have conflicts going on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Between the Palestinians and the Jews, the Jewish military there. And of course, Hamas, and they're throwing rocks, but Hamas is shooting rockets over, trying to kill people.
But you were able to get in there on this trip.
Able to get in there on this trip, take people to where Jesus was born, where the grotto is.
Yeah.
And people ride camels. I mean, we have a great time, but wonderful food, great hotels. They always take very good care of you when you're there. We start out in Tel Aviv, fly into Tel Aviv, and then progress through the whole country.
So like we were saying before, you actually walk through places where this book talks about. It becomes very real. About
5.5 miles a day.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
there
you go. When we get to Jerusalem, about the last 4 days is in Jerusalem. You go to every station of the cross. People know the song, the Via Dolorosa, but that's every station of the cross. Golgotha's Hill, the empty tomb, the Garden of Gethsemane, which is one of my most favorite places to go. And there's the Mount of Ascension. There's Mount Carmel, where Elijah defeated 450 prophets of Baal, and ran down off the hill and told King Ahab, you better get off this hill because it's about to rain. Just great. All the things and places that you read in this book are there, touchable, physically there, historically there.
So it's not a fairy tale.
Not a fairy tale, my friend.
That's right. It's the truth.
Total historical. And got to stand in the synagogue where Jesus healed the man with the withered hand. Synagogue's still there. The ruins of it are still there. Some of the most beautiful Roman ruins that are there where the Romans controlled the territory, the Turks. It's just, man alive. They uncover so much stuff there. It's mind-boggling. They just recently uncovered, while they were digging for utilities, right?
Yeah.
So they never know when they're like digging to put a new drain line in for water or whatever, they hit an archaeological find. So they just uncovered a burial cave full of artifacts dating back to Abraham.
Yep.
Just
pretty hard to argue with all that.
Yeah, you can't.
So that's awesome, man. So you went all over the world and helping people and also walking it out. So that's awesome.
Met with all my cops there,
Yeah,
every country I go to. And even some Palestinian police officers.
Right,
Just loved on them and hugged their neck and gave them a little keychain, you know, from our police department here in Bargersville. And
very cool.
Yeah,
very
cool. Awesome.
Well, we got a guest with us here.
We do.
She's sitting over there,
silent, just listening.
Here. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Your trip had to be powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful. Yeah.
Miss Molly Winters-Carie.
Correct.
Yeah.
And she is a survivor. You're the first survivor that we've had on the podcast here. So thanks for being
honored.
with us.
Thanks for letting me be here
we're
today.
Glad you came.
That is a title that no one wants to have, but in a very important title, not just in law enforcement circles, but really throughout our country, which are those surviving family members of our fallen officers. And you unfortunately have had to walk that out. But you've been a great example to us, and we're looking forward to talking about that today.
Well, I appreciate that because I really like to share my testimony.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll help somebody else walk that walk of grief and help them to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, you better take care of business and look at the camera and say good morning to your sweetheart.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good
and
morning,
what about Jeff? Oh, yeah.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
Jeff.
good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening.
Whenever you're watching.
Whenever you're watching.
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, as we said, you're a surviving family member of a fallen officer, and we want to hear about your testimony, your story. But I think what will be interesting for everybody who's watching and listening to this is your story doesn't end there, which is the great thing that we like to see with this title of survivor. It's way more than just surviving. It's also about thriving, and also what you've been able to do to help other folks. So thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me be here.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that you didn't let that defining moment define the rest of your life.
You know, you go through a lot of different emotions and a lot of thoughts and feelings, and in the beginning, it almost did.
Yeah.
I'd like to back up, if I could, with you
tell
guys
us your story.
to June 1990. June 1990.
Wow.
I was with Gregg and several Muncie police officers and things like that. We were in Dayton, Ohio, and we were there for the National FOP softball tournament. And you know how you go travel with friends and you all gather in a room together and you have pizzas and drinks and things like that. We were all talking and the conversation got very serious. And they said, we feel like this is going to be the year something's going to happen on the Muncie Police Department. Don't know what it's going to be, but we feel like something bad's going to happen.
Wow.
And
So
I remember
Gregg, was that your husband at the time?
Gregg was my husband at the time. He was a patrolman with Muncie Police Department.
And when you say Muncie, you're saying Muncie, Indiana.
Muncie, Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he was an officer at the time?
He was an officer with them and also was on the softball team, the traveling softball team.
How long had he been an officer at that time?
He had been an officer for about 4 years at that time.
Okay. And so this is Gregg Winters.
Gregg William Winters.
Gotcha.
Greg William.
Gregg
All right.
William. I have a grandson now named Graham William.
Is that right?
Yeah, first
There you go.
grandbaby.
Yeah. Oh, you brat. You beat me.
You bet.
Nothing better.
There
Nothing better.
isn't anything better.
So you're at this hotel.
We're at the hotel and we're just talking, and I said, if something happens to Gregg, I want it to be one of you 5 to come get me, because I knew those officers and I didn't want someone to show up at my door to tell me something had happened with Gregg that I didn't know.
Here, do this. Pull your headphones off.
Okay.
I have to do this all the time. Straight. There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Your hair messes up
Yep,
too?
that's exactly
All
right.
You're-
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I don't
to shake
I
it
don't
off.
think so. He never does that for me. He'll just leave my hair
Oh, yeah,
looking
most
goofy.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for
I
letting me
just
know.
knew
Yeah,
that
there
you
you
would
go.
say, why didn't you say anything?
Yeah.
So anyway, the later the evening got, we went back to laughing and playing cards and things like that. Nothing else was ever said that evening about maybe something happening on the police department. Well, then come August of 1990, I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning because I had a nightmare. And when I look back on that now, I truly believe in my heart that it was a premonition from God. But this nightmare consisted of Gregg was on a call by himself. It was dark. There was snow on the ground. And a tall white man with short brown hair came up from behind him and shot him in the back of the head.
Wow.
That was your dream.
That was my dream.
Wow.
And so when he got home that morning, I shared that with him. And, he does what most police officers do. Oh, you just worry too much.
Right.
I'm okay. Everything will be all right.
Yeah.
So come December 23rd of 1990, we were watching the news. And there was a lady that had been on life support and feeding tubes for about 10, 15 years. Gregg told me, if anything ever happens to me, let me die with my dignity.
Right.
Don't keep me alive by machines. Don't keep me alive with feeding tubes. Let me die with my dignity.
Here. Yeah.
So, we had a conversation about if something happened to him, what he would like to see at his visitation, what he would like to see at his funeral, what he would like to be buried in, what he would like our children, because Kyle was 3 years old and Brock was 10 months old,
Wow.
what he would like for our sons to know as they grew and faced each milestone
went
of
through
life.
all of that
We
conversation.
went through that entire conversation. It was about an
Holy
hour.
smoly.
When we finished, I remember looking at Gregg and saying, okay, now here's my wishes. And he said to me, I don't need to know those. You need to know mine. It kind of gives me chills still to this day, that conversation.
I just got one myself.
But I didn't think anything else about it because we talked a lot about a lot of things in life on a daily basis.
Right.
Now, how long had you been married at this time?
We had been married for 6 years at this time.
Wow. Okay.
So then...
And you have two sons at that time. Brock?
Brock was 10 months old and Kyle was 3 years old.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so they were young.
Little boys.
Little boys. They were daddy's pride and
Oh,
joy.
yeah.
Oh, there's nothing like a son with a daddy.
That's right.
But December 27th, he went to work. We had 8 inches of snow that night that had fallen on the ground. So about midnight, he came home because he worked the afternoon shift. So about midnight, he stopped by home. He was working our district. He
Okay.
said, we're a little slow. I just thought I'd stop and say hello because I'm a night person.
Okay.
So I didn't go to bed early. So we visited for about 15, 20 minutes, and there was a call that came across that said someone had had a wreck, and that individual left the car at the scene of the wreck, but the individual took off walked
Okay.
away from the scene. Well, another police officer came over the airwaves and said, hey, I'm closer. I'll take the call. So Gregg and I visited for a few more minutes, and he said, really, that was my call. I need to go. So we did what we always did when we parted ways, whether we were going to the grocery store, if we were going to church, if we were going to work. We kissed, we hugged, we said, I love you.
Yeah.
He got to the back door, opened it up, and I'll never forget this for as long as I lived. He opened that door, he turned around and looked me straight in the eyes and said, do you know how much I love you? And then he turned around and walked out the door.
Wow.
It was about 10 till 2 that morning. So this is a couple hours later. Brock, the 10-month-old, cried out in his sleep. And I thought, oh my goodness, now we're going to get another ear infection. There's some kind of illness starting.
Right.
I would later find out that was the exact time that Gregg was shot. At 10 till 2, one of those 5 officers I told you about from the June softball tournament was knocking on my door.
Wow.
They tell you when something traumatic happens, you just kind of go into a remote being, I guess you would say. Well, I heard someone pounding on my back door, and I thought, it's Gregg. And I got halfway to that door, and I thought, this isn't Gregg. This is my nightmare becoming reality. So I went back to my room. I got dressed. I came back to the back door. About the time that I did that, Gregg's brother, who was a detective with the Muncie Police Department, had called me. The phone was ringing. And I answered the phone, and Terry said, "Molly, is anybody there?" And I said, "Somebody's knocking on my back door." And he said, "Who is it?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Look, this is where you go into that protective mode as a survivor." I said, "Terry, I don't know how to look." He said, "You need to take your left hand, pull it on the curtain, pull the curtain aside, and look out the window." And I did, and I told him who the officer was. He said, "Now let him in." I said, "Terry, I don't know how." He said, "Put your right hand on the deadbolt, turn it to the left till it clicks."
He had to tell you everything to
He
do.
told me every step. And with the things that I've been through and the training I've been through now, I now know that I went into the freeze mode because if I didn't accept what was happening on the other side of that door, my nightmare wasn't going to become a reality.
Yeah,
I didn't
just don't
have
let
to
him in.
hear. That's right. Don't have to hear what he's about to tell me. So he talked me through that, talked me through opening the door, motioning the officer in, told me things to get together, told me that my nieces were on the way to the house to be with the boys, and that this officer was taking me to the hospital to be with Gregg. I mean, there are certain things that happen when you receive that knock on the door that you never forget. And every survivor you would ever meet can tell you about that knock on the door.
Yes, they can.
Yep, they sure can.
So that was in 1990.
That was December 28th of 1990.
So that's the same year that you had the discussion with
Correct.
the softball. That's the same year that you have the dream.
Correct.
And then it's just days after you have this conversation watching the television story.
Correct.
And but that's the night that this occurred. And when they arrived, did they tell you that he had been shot?
The officer told me he had been shot, and he said, "I don't know anything else." Well, to me, that was a red flag because, unfortunately, we all three know about law enforcement.
Right.
And when it's bad, you give very little details, is what I feel. So he took me to the hospital. It was Ball Memorial Hospital in Muncie, Indiana. And when I got there, they took me back, and they tried to warn me that Gregg's got all kinds of tubes and things all over him and not to be alarmed. And I said, I've dealt with this before, trauma, not someone being shot, but trauma. So I'm prepared. And I went in and I talked to Gregg, and I could see his stats, changing. To me, that was saying that he recognized me and he understood that I was there. So the doctor came out a little later and he said, "I don't know how many times he's been shot, but he's been shot in the back of the head. There's nothing we can do here in Muncie for him. We need to send him to Methodist." I've since found out the reason you've come to Methodist in Indianapolis, Indiana is because they're a big trauma center. So he came to Methodist, and I said, I have to be in that ambulance with him because if Gregg would have died en route from Muncie to Indianapolis, he wasn't going to die without me being by his side.
Right.
So we get here, and they're running their test, and they're doing, what they need to do. And in came Gregg's partner. And it happened to be that night that they were separated since it was snowy and a quiet, so-called quiet night. They separated them into one-man cars. So Eric was by himself, Gregg was by himself. And his partner came walking in, and I said, "Tell me about the perpetrator." And he said, "Well, all I know so far is that it is a white male, and he has," and Eric stopped, and he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, my heavens, your dream." And I said, "It's a tall white man with short brown hair, isn't it?" And he said, "It is."
Wow.
Yeah. The perpetrator was about 6'4", 6'6", short brown hair. And, it's just, again, it's one of those things that with history, you'll never forget. You always remember everything. But the doctor came out shortly after that and said Gregg had been shot multiple times in the back of the head. The first bullet went in, it shattered C1, which controls, all of our body movements, our breathing, everything. The second bullet that went in cut C2 in half. So if any body function would have survived the first shot, it definitely was gone with the second shot. and then 3, 4 went into the back of the head, almost like in a straight line. Number 5 went behind his right ear as he fell forward over the steering wheel. And then shot 6 went into the bullet-resistant vest. And we had just purchased that ourselves because back then it wasn't,
departments weren't required to
you're
provide
correct.
it. Yeah.
And we bought that because we wanted that extra hedge of protection. So the last bullet went into the vest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So sorry.
Well, I appreciate
So
that.
that's on
very
December
28th.
So you're at Methodist. You're at this trauma hospital, and he is hooked up to all these things.
Correct.
And what happens from there?
Well, the doctor comes out, this is a Friday, and tells us that, there's nothing they can do for Gregg. And I'd had that conversation with him 5 days earlier, so I knew what his wishes were.
Can we just stop for a second right
Yes.
there and just, I know everybody watching is just getting the depth of how many things you dealt with or knew beforehand that the Lord really set you up to help you through some of these things.
You're absolutely right.
Just amazing.
You're absolutely
That's
right.
God. I mean, that's just amazing
You're absolutely right.
that the Holy Spirit would reveal those things to help us as humans through those moments of life.
You're absolutely right.
Man,
But anyway, we were there for 11 days. And day 1, the doctor said he's not going to make it through the weekend. And I said, well, having 2 young children and our family was very close. My family was very close to Gregg's family. We want open visitation so that anytime anyone wants to go back to see Gregg, they can do that.
okay.
So the doctor said, okay, well, I'm going to fast forward to day number 5. Day number 5, Gregg is still holding on. Well, in that 5-day period, Brock was 10 months old. He didn't grasp it. He didn't know what was going on. Kyle did, because Kyle was Daddy's little buddy.
Kyle is 3 at this time.
3. They had matching sweatsuits.
Yeah,
they'd
of
go
course.
outside and get a 2x4 and just hammer a nail in it just because.
Just for fun.
Yeah. On payday, they would wear these sweatsuits and they'd go get Daddy's paycheck, and then they'd go to lunch, and it was a guy's day, and they would always tell Brock, when you can eat McDonald's French fries, baby, you can come with us.
That's awesome.
So that was
What a
pretty
great
cool.
deal.
But on day 5, the doctor came out and said, I don't understand it. I don't know why he's still alive, but you need to look at making that decision on turning off the ventilator. Because you see, when Gregg was shot, had been arrested, okay, the perpetrator had been arrested at the scene. He had a small gun in his hand, was handcuffed behind, and then kind of turned sideways in his in the back seat of the patrol car. And it was a little .22 automatic. So the first shot went, the rest of the shots went in succession. And he had said the reason he was trying to get away is because he was in the middle of a custody battle with his wife because they were getting divorced. And he didn't want to go to jail and harm his chances of getting custody of a son. So anyway, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around, but once I get to tell Gregg's
crazy.
story and our testimony, it's like I can't talk fast enough because I want everybody to know that even though this was a tragedy, I made it a positive.
Yeah.
But day 5, the doctor said that, and so I told Gregg's parents. They told me it was, what my decision was, and what Gregg had shared with me, what his wishes were.
Right.
Well, the FOP is very survivor friendly, and some representatives came into the hospital.
The FOP being the Fraternal Order of Police.
Correct.
Okay.
They, a couple of their attorneys came in, and when the attorneys came in, I'll never forget it. They said, if you tell the doctors that it's okay to turn off the ventilator, then when you go to court, capital murder, they could say you, Molly Winters, killed Gregg and not the perpetrator. So you have to let him lay here until his body gives out.
Holy schmoly.
So day number 8, same conversation with the doctors. I don't know why he isn't dead yet. He should be dead. We're not doing any life-saving measures. We know He said, do not resuscitate. We had just a lengthy conversation, and I remember telling that doctor, there's a reason
Right.
why Gregg's holding on. And one day we will know what that reason is.
Right.
Well, throughout this time, I would take the boys back anytime, Kyle wanted to see Daddy. He and my nephew would color pictures, and we'd hang them up in Gregg's room and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, on day number 11, Kyle climbed up on his daddy's bed because he really had not been talking to him the entire 11 days. He would just stand back and just stare at his daddy. Day number 11, he climbed up on his daddy's bed and he goes, wake up, Daddy, wake up. He said, look what I got. And he held up a Hot Wheel. And he said, people are coming from all over Daddy, and they're bringing Mommy food and Bubby diapers. And look, Daddy, I got a Hot Wheel. They're bringing me toys. And he's like, look, Daddy, we're going to play Hot Wheels. And he ran the Hot Wheels up and down Gregg's arms and up and down his chest. And I say the dam broke. The river just started running because Kyle, for that entire 11 days, you never know what a child's thinking.
Oh, you don't.
He told Gregg about that entire 11-day period that we had been in the hospital, what he had seen, what was going on, what was happening, all those kinds of things. And he said, a policeman took us to McDonald's in the police car, Daddy, and we turned on the lights and sirens like what we did in your car. And he just on and on and on. And then he said, wake up, Daddy, wake up. Then, played a little bit longer, and then it was time for bed. So my sister was taking Kyle to bed. And when he left Gregg's room, he kissed him. He hugged him. He said, I love you, Daddy. Have good dreams. Gregg died a few short hours later. I have always said that Gregg held on for 11 days until Kyle understood Daddy went to work. A bad guy shot him. Daddy's not coming home.
Right.
But we're going to make it.
Yeah.
So I have always felt that that's why he laid for 11 days.
Wow.
And that people were taking care of his sons and his wife.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we hear from survivors, but also just folks who have a loved one that's, there's a traumatic loss of life, unexpected, those kinds of things, right? You hear people say, on one hand, where they go quickly, that seemed to be a blessing. And then for others, where there is a time frame that's involved, that also seems to be a blessing in some ways as well. And it's just interesting how it's almost like we were just talking about, how God gives you what you need in that moment to be able to step through that and walk that out. And, it's, right in line with the not just the dreams, but the discussions and what you guys saw and all those other things. And it's just a remarkable story. And what a length of time. So 11 days.
11 days.
Yeah, that's a lot.
11 days.
Yeah. And when you look back, sometimes you think that 11 days was really 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then some days when you look back, you think that 11 days was about 6 months.
And so here you are, it's
a long time.
Young mom with 2 little boys, and you've just not only lost your officer, but the love of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone looking at that's going to say, how can anyone move forward from there?
It's difficult. You have those days that you don't want to be mommy. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to feed your children or change diapers or any of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
You have this pain and this pit in your stomach that no matter what you do, you can't get rid of it. Matter of fact, to be very honest, I got extremely mad at God.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought, there are people out there who don't value life,
Right.
don't value their families,
Yep.
and why could it not have been one of them? Why did it have to be Gregg, who was a great husband, a great daddy, a great son, all of those kinds of things? So I turned to drinking. And I started drinking, and every Friday night I had a girlfriend that would call me on Thursday and say, where are we going tomorrow night? So she would come pick me up on Friday. She would take me to the bars. I would drink. I would get drunk.
Probably thinking she's helping you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Right.
In hindsight, she really did help me.
Mm-hmm.
But she would get me home safely. She would pick me up Saturday night. She would take me out to the bars again. On Sunday, there would be times that I was so hungover or so sick from drinking that I would call my family, and I know that they knew, but they didn't say anything.
Right.
Tell them that I must have the stomach flu. Could they come get the boys? Could they come watch the boys? Because I just couldn't handle it today.
Yeah.
And they would. They would come take care of the boys for the day. And I would lay there and I would cry and I'd waller in pity and I'd feel sorry for myself. And I'd be very honest, yell at God and cuss God.
Sure.
And how could you do this to me? And, after about week 6, she said, are you finding the relief you need?
Wow.
And I said, no, not really. So she asked me a few insightful questions, and week 7 came and went. Week number 8, started to go out drink, and I thought, no, there's something in my heart, there's something in my head that is saying, if you die today, Molly, you stand in front of God, and I honestly believe Gregg will be there as well, and you're going to look them both in the eye, and you're going to say, you are such a weak individual that you turned to drinking and someone else had to raise your children. And I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't do that.
There you go.
Wow.
So it was that point that I really had that fall to your knees moment. And it was by the strength that God gave me at that point in time and my determination that I quit drinking. I had no alcohol in my house. And I concentrated on my children and learning how to get out of bed every day.
Every day.
And
one day at a time.
One step at a time.
Yeah,
Now,
buddy.
when all this happens, you're in your 20s?
I'm 29.
Wow.
29.
Which, is so often the time frame where a lot of young adults have these epiphanies in life is usually that 27, 28, 29-year-old time frame where they kind of reach that fundamental fork in the road, right? And then you have this life-altering event and loss that occurs at the same time. And wow, what an example for other people who might find themselves in that moment right now.
Yeah, it really takes a lot of hard work, but not only on yourself, your support person and your support family. Excuse me. I had a survivor call me, and she said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a police survivor. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
This is during that time frame?
This is during that time frame, and I said, okay, well, I need to go. She said, well, let me just ask you a question real quick. And I said, okay, what's that? And she said, you feel like pulling the covers up over your head and saying goodbye to everything? And I said, yes. She said, you don't want to get out of bed and play with the kids or feed them or any of that? And I said, yes. She goes, well, let me tell you about this organization. And I said, okay. She said, there's an organization called Concerns of Police Survivors. And she said, next May, they have a ceremony in May of every year for National Police Week.
Right.
She said, this organization has 2 days of grief seminars. Well, you hear grief seminars, and what do you think? Oh, great. We're going to be sitting in a circle. We're going to be crying. We're going to be holding hands. She said it's
kumbaya.
Yeah. She said it's not that way. She said it's a place where you can go, that you're in a safe environment. People understand if you laugh and cry at the same time. And you know what? Gregg's going to be honored, and he's going to be put on the National Memorial Wall. And you'll be there for that. And that's huge. That's important.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, fine, whatever. So I went. And you know what? I attended those grief seminars. And I'll never forget, on the night of visitation for Gregg's funeral, I had a woman walk up to me, pat me on the shoulder, tell me, oh, honey, it's okay. You're young, you're pretty, in 12 months you'll forget all about this.
What?
Oh, my.
So after 12 months...
So after they pulled you off of her and
No.
made her a wig with the hair you pulled out of her head.
No, God puts you in a fog when something like this happens.
That's a good thing.
So you don't do that.
Yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it?
That's exactly what he does.
Yeah. Woo.
So when the first year was over, and I was in a worse condition than what I was for the first 12 months, because like I said, God puts you in that fog.
Right.
Well, after 12 months, it becomes reality.
Yeah.
Gregg's not coming home. This is my life, and welcome to it.
Yeah.
I went to that grief session, and I had a mental health professional in there that told us, you don't forget about it.
Right.
It's going to take you 4 up to 5 years to fully deal with this traumatic loss, to fully deal with everything, because the norm in your life as you knew it is over.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have to learn to build a new normal for me.
Yeah.
But I also have to teach my children how to grieve.
That's right.
And how to build a new normal for them.
Yeah. It's not just you walking through it.
That's right.
That's right.
And you have a responsibility
That's
to
right.
others, right? Wow.
Yeah. So that was the first time that somebody had told me that,
So these are grief sessions
Correct.
for concerns of police survivors.
Correct.
And you said that was during Police Week
Correct.
in Washington, D.C. is where that occurs.
Correct.
Do the grief sessions happen there?
They do happen there. Police Week is about 5 days worth of ceremonies that's honoring this officer and the sacrifice he or she made. But, it's also honoring the surviving family members and friends and coworkers, because during National Police Week, you go through stuff where you realize you're not alone, that there is someone there. So peer support is huge.
Huge, yeah.
You make lifelong friends.
Right.
But you get those resources, and you get that education, and you get that support, and you get that hope that you need.
Yeah.
That helps you to then go home and put one foot in front of the other that we had talked about.
Yeah. When my wife's dad was killed in the line of duty, they didn't have any of that. Yeah.
Correct. This just National Concerns of Police Survivors started in 1984.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it had just
So-
gotten up and
Just
going.
got
Just
going.
gotten up and
Wow.
running.
Think about that, 1984. Think about all those families before
Before that.
1984.
You're right.
Yeah.
And we have local families that had nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
And they will stand up and tell you today what a difference Concerns of Police Survivors has made
Oh, yeah.
since it's been formed, and they've become a part of that.
So that's a
Yeah,
national
that's
organization. It's formed in 1984.
Correct.
You're walking this out 1990, 1991,
Correct.
right? The lady who called you, that was a survivor, was she from Indiana as well?
She was from Indianapolis.
Okay.
Really?
So she's
Indianapolis.
someone who has gone through this.
Absolutely. Her
She
husband
knew
was
this
killed
new-
in 1981.
Okay, so when that
Right.
happened, this organization wasn't in existence.
Correct.
She knows of it. That's a national organization, but we also know that has state chapters, if you will.
Correct.
So did you, at the time when that happened, did you have an Indiana C.O.P.S chapter?
We did not have an Indiana C.O.P.S chapter. They tell you at National Police Week when you go for the C.O.P.S seminars, the first year you go for yourself and for the officer.
Right.
The second year you go for yourself and yourself only. The third year you go back, you go to help others. After that third year back, I said, this is what my calling is. This is what God
That's
wants me
awesome.
to do.
Yeah. Come on.
Wow.
So I went back every year. I not only helped Indiana families when we had a line of duty in the state of Indiana, but I would go to National Police Week and I would help survivors on a national level,
From all over the country.
all over the
All over
country,
the country.
Puerto Rico, Canada, every place.
So you do this, did you do your first police week in May of 91? Or
No.
was it the following?
It was May of 92 because Gregg died on January 8 of
Right.
1991.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way they do that is for police week, they recognize the officers from the prior calendar year.
Correct.
So with that, you do your first one in 92. You go back in 93 for yourself.
Correct.
94 for
To reach out to others.
to others. And then you said that you were back there in 95 in D.C.
Correct.
and you realize this is
That-
what I'm supposed to be doing.
This
This
is
is
what I'm
your
supposed
calling,
to do.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Boy, and there's
So-
nothing more powerful than
You're
that,
right.
is it?
And
Gives you direction.
it does. And people say, why do you share your story? Isn't it heartbreaking? No. The more you share
right.
your story, the more it helps you personally
That's
to heal.
right.
But I'm giving hope to that next person that's going to walk this walk.
You know, I say that as a pastor, I say that to people all the time about sharing the testimony of their life and how they came to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior of their life. People who don't share their testimony never experience what, even in you sharing in this instance, they never experience the joy and the hope and help somebody else that needs to know they're not alone. Because the number one enemy in dealing with grief is isolation.
I believe that.
Feeling like
You're
nobody
alone.
knows, nobody understands, I'm by myself, and I don't know what to do with this amount or level of grief. And then you start self-medicating.
Yeah.
You start trying to find something to make you feel better. And that's when you really get into a ditch and into trouble.
Right.
But the Lord brought you out of that.
He sure did.
And man, what a great life.
I mean, you look at that, and it's like, so God
amazing.
gives you some of these revelations leading up to this,
Right.
reveals this to you, really helps you walk through that, survive through that, right? But then also because of that, and the grace that He's placed on your life in that moment and beyond, He empowers you to then be able to help other folks.
There you go.
Right.
So you don't have this chapter in Indiana. What do you do?
Well, in 1997,
Okay.
I became the National Trustee of Concerns of Police Survivors. So
Really?
I
Wow.
oversaw a 5-state area.
Holy
So you jumped
smoly.
right in, both
So,
feet.
I was in my
went in boot
element.
deep, yeah.
I was in my element. I was able to help survivors, in 5 different states. I was able to, and it might just be a phone call. It might just be a hug in passing, but, you're there. You help
That's
them.
right.
But I thought, at the grassroots level, we don't have anything. So I founded the Indiana chapter of C.O.P.S.
Come on.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Did you?
Right.
What year did you do that?
1997 is when.
Same year.
Yep. Same
Wow.
year is when I became the national trustee.
Holy smoly.
Yeah. And it was all possible because, I have a great support system. First of all, my family, great support system.
Right.
But I've always included my children. That
you go.
this is something that's important
Gave
to mommy.
them purpose. Yeah.
Yes. And if you want to be a part of this, you can be a part of this. If you want to go talk to other children or just go play, we'll go.
So talk about that for a moment, because a lot of times I think people think that would be a time almost that you shield your children away
Right.
from the harsh realities of what has occurred. And from what I have seen time and time again, that's not what C.O.P.S. as the organization does, specifically with children of fallen officers.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that. What are the ways that C.O.P.S. kind of wraps their arms around the kids of our fallen?
Well, I have to tell you, 1997 was probably that monumental year for me because 1997 was the first C.O.P.S. kids camp. And this
Oh, wow.
was kids from, at that point in time, any age up to 14.
Now, a lot of people don't know this exists.
Correct. They don't. So we went to this C.O.P.S. kids camp. And like I said, kids from newborn up to 14. We
Right.
spent all week together. And it's the surviving parent or guardian and the child. And you learn how to interact with each other. You learn how to sit and talk about what you're going through.
Right.
You see these kids make lifelong friendships as well because little Tommy, well, I'm just going to say Kyle and Brock, they can be looked at as different by kids that they go to preschool
Right,
with
sure.
or go to school with, but they are finally in an environment as well where all the children in this camp have lost an officer in the line of duty.
Wow.
So nobody's judging you. Nobody's picking on you.
That's
Nobody's.
awesome.
We're just all here to get along and to have a good time and share who was your daddy or who was your mommy and what did they do and how did they do it. And it's a week of a lot of healing because as the children are doing this, the surviving parent, the guardian, is over here
Is getting it
and
too.
we're bonding.
See, that's powerful because my wife's mother, their relationship struggled because they didn't talk about anything. There was there was nothing like
Right.
that, right? And I'm just thinking along the lines of what you're sharing here, what that relationship could have been different had they both been able to get the kind of help during that time that you and your children were able to, and you started, you helped build the thing. That's just
You'll
amazing.
find in our society we don't like at all to talk about death and dying.
We do not.
We don't like it.
Oh, no.
So when I would go to the grocery store and my friends would turn and go down the other aisle so they didn't have to see me, or we'd go to a parade downtown Muncie,
Oh, wow.
and my friends would cross the street so they didn't have to pass us. Number one, you're in a very vulnerable position because you've had this traumatic experience and you're trying to figure out life and what direction you're taking. But then you start to take that on and think, what did I do to them?
Yeah.
What have I done?
So
Why
isolation,
don't
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
just
that's
more
where
isolation.
Absolutely.
Well, and
Whereas,
you think about this, that's you as an adult. Now imagine as a child.
The child, yeah.
I mean,
You know, I have to share this story with you. I won't tell you which child it was, but one of my sons came home one day after school and was crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, well, you know, his best little buddy is having a birthday party. And everybody was invited to the birthday party except for my son. And when my son asked his friend, why did I not get invited? He said, my mommy said, you don't have a daddy. So if you come to my birthday party and you see me and my daddy playing, you might get sad and start crying because you don't have your daddy here.
Oh, wow.
And then you're going to make everybody at my party sad. Now, that's the mentality of some adults. That's sad.
That
in and
is
of
very
itself.
sad.
Yeah. So, but I didn't want that to happen anymore. And that's why I founded Indiana C.O.P.S, because we need that peer support.
Yes, we do.
We need the tie
It's
to law
awesome.
enforcement, because we have a lot of law enforcement officers who have never been affected by a line of duty death, but are there to help the survivors. And, you know, if we have a get together such as a cookout, maybe they're just cooking hot dogs, but you know what? That's huge, because the survivors see that interaction and everything that's still there.
And officers also pledge to the family
Yes.
and to those children that they're not ever going to let their parent be forgotten.
Correct.
That was killed in the line of duty. So it also gives a place for those officers to honor their word in very positive ways.
Correct.
With those children and with that survivor. That's so powerful.
Yeah. that is
So
very
powerful.
so you think about it. So an entire state, Indiana at the time, they don't have this as a chapter. And out of your pain, out of your grief, you make that happen. And so the chapter launches in 1997.
Correct.
And then you think about all the families that have benefited, not just the line of duty deaths that occurred after 97, but the families who were able to benefit pre-97 from that occurring. What's that feel like for you?
I'm a very humbled person. So I have to say, I really don't let myself go there and think about that. What I think about is the FOP team, Fraternal Order Police, their critical incident team, and the Indianapolis Police Department that came to the hospital when Gregg first arrived there, and then came and, you know, visited with us and seen us every day after that for 11 days, then came to Muncie and helped put on the funeral. I just remember how powerful that was to me, because when I went to the funeral home to make arrangements for Gregg's funeral, you know, I was going to do it at the funeral home. I said, we'll have maybe 100 people here. They're like, oh, no. We'll talk. And, you know, they brought in this gentleman that has been my dad ever since. And I just remember, if it hadn't been for that support that I had, you know, I'd have never made it. If my girlfriend wouldn't have said, is that pain going away? Are you feeling any relief? You know, it's just a culmination of a lot of people and a lot of things.
Well, there's something to be said for that. So you've got this friend. She's really not, in a way, enabling you to go into
Correct.
self-destruction. She's walking alongside
She's
you, kind
protecting
of
you.
protecting you through that. And then when the time is right, she asks the
those
powerful questions that really
Snapped you
open that
back.
up out of there.
Yeah.
And about a year later, you know, we had a conversation, and I said, why did you do that? And she said, you know, we don't understand death and dying. She said, I don't know what you're going through. I don't have a clue.
Right.
She said, but if I can do my part to get you where you need to be, let you do what you need to do and not harm yourself and get you back home, then I've done right by Gregg.
There you go.
I've done right.
So let me stop here and say something to everybody watching this that is not a part of law enforcement or law enforcement family. Number one, if you are a part of somebody's life and they have a traumatic incident, don't say stupid things. Don't try to explain away their grief or explain death to them. Love them. Be with them. Just put your hand on them help them walk through that. Bring them a bag of groceries. Be kind. Be kind to their children. Don't say dumb things or try to explain things that you really, truly don't understand. And it's through ignorance sometimes that we make statements that wound people even deeper at the moment than what they're going through. Just be kind, right?
I agree.
Yeah, the ministry of presence is huge in those moments, right?
Yes.
Huge.
And when we use that term ministry of, you don't have to be a preacher. You don't have to be what people think of as a minister.
Yeah.
It is truly walking along somebody, maybe jumping down in the pit with them and helping to walk them back up out of there.
That's right.
But to really relate to them in a way with the humanity.
Right.
That's the key. Not trying to relate like you know what they're going through.
Thank you.
But that you provide that human touch.
Correct.
That really kind of keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
Grounded in, doesn't allow you to float away out there in isolation, but grounded in reality here is just a remarkable thing. And I guess, so take what I asked you, now turn that a little bit. I wasn't really asking you as much for you, like what's that mean inside for you? I think what I'm asking is, what's it mean to you that out of your event, this tragic loss, Gregg's sacrifice, out of that, all these other families benefit? Because you said it, it's not if, but when.
Correct.
When these families in the future go through this, they now have this network, this support for them, this net to catch them. I mean, what's that mean for you, that out of that tragedy comes that?
It's powerful, because I could have gone the path of drinking.
Right.
I could have gone the path of someone raising my children. But God gave me the strength and the determination to make sure that other survivors have the resources they need. So to me, that's very important, that you don't want to get out of bed today. That's okay.
Yeah.
Next week, you're going to take a shower. That's okay. A week later, you're going to put on your shoes and stay in your sweats. That's okay. But go to the grocery store. You know, it's just very powerful to let them know that, yeah, I was at that deepest, darkest moment. But not only me, but all of these other families, we've learned to take one step at a time. And you're going to learn to take that one step at a time.
So I have a scripture for you on,
Okay.
on just exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
And you're going to probably know the scripture. Most of you will, or you will know it when I get done reading it. But it says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose, for whom he did foreknow, he also predestinated to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. In the Greek, when it says all things work together for the good, it is in the context of baking a cake. You wouldn't sit down and eat a cup of flour.
No.
Right? You wouldn't sit down and eat a spoonful of soda.
No.
Baking soda. You wouldn't just sit down and eat 2 cups of sugar, right?
Right.
You got to throw it all in there together. And you wouldn't take a sip of vanilla extract. I mean, it's horrible, right? In itself, it's like, it ain't like eating a vanilla pudding. It's all, but when you lump all that in together, God has a way of taking the painful parts of our life, the wonderful parts of our life, the I'm not sure parts of our life. I don't know where my purpose and what to do with all this now. I don't know what's going to happen to my children. And put that all in the bowl of life, stir it up, and bake it. And you find purpose, your words, not mine. You find calling. In the middle of that, you find, geez, how many lives has she touched and helped? I mean, we know her personally, but thousands upon thousands on the national scene.
Because it didn't just end at Indiana C.O.P.S, right?
Correct.
What happened from there?
Well, I was the national trustee for C.O.P.S for 3 years, 97 to 2000. And then May of 2000 to May of 2002, I became the national president of
Look at
C.O.P.S.
that. Look at that.
I just wanted to continue to do more. And, you know, kind of in answer to your question as well, you know, there are still times that I have difficult days, but what I guess I get that humbling feeling and that great feeling from is that some of these families I have worked with, I can call them, and now they're walking me through my difficult days.
There you go.
So that's what it was all about. But anyway, I became the national president of C.O.P.S, oversaw the entire United States and Puerto Rico.
You said from 2000 to 2002.
Correct.
Which means that you were national president of the National C.O.P.S during September the 11th.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. That was something that I'll never forget. I went into Washington, D.C., and I took a person with me that we went in and we trained the federal workers that were going to go to the Pentagon and work with families there of deceased people from the attack there, and also federal workers that were going into Ground Zero, going into New York to work with family members of deceased there as well.
And if someone had told you back in December the 29th or 28th, 1990, that your life would be used by God to touch all of those families, you'd have went, "You're crazy, get out of here."
I would have, because,
Jeez.
you know, I was never that person to stand in front of people and talk. I could talk one-on-one, but I did not like to talk to a classroom of people or, you know, anyone. I was just a very quiet person. But it became that, you know what, I got a story to tell. And this story could help someone else.
You got a story that you have to tell.
I have to tell.
Gotta tell it.
Yep. And so I can say, and this, I guess, is kind of my, I don't know, this is my kudos to God. He got it to where I stood, because my first time, I also teach for Concerns of Police Survivors. Okay. I do trainings on proper death notification and dealing with line of duty deaths throughout the country. I do these trainings. And they called me in 1998 and said, "We have an instructor that's sick, and this is baptism by fire. Go do this." And I was so nervous. But I went from that first time that I taught, and there were 110 people in that class, to speaking at the National Candlelight Vigil, which had 25,000 people.
Wow.
That's right.
And it was like, thank you, God,
Yeah.
because they don't know me. They're not going to remember me, but they are going to remember a little bit
Your
about
story.
Gregg.
That's
So
right.
here's the key point in all of this, and that's why I asked the question, and you get it from the scripture, which I think is a lot of times, especially in law enforcement, but in general, right? When the really bad thing happens, so often, just as you shared, people are quick to blame God. And we attribute the bad thing, the evil act, to a loving God, which doesn't mix.
Right.
And that's the key thing that I think is an epiphany for a lot of folks, is when they latch on to there is such a thing as good and evil in this world. And God doesn't cause bad things to happen,
I agree.
but he will use them for his good.
That's
Which
right.
is what that scripture is saying right there.
I agree.
And you look at this, it's really, as you shared, a call on your life, probably way before you were even formed,
You're absolutely
that
right.
even in these things, not that God would cause a bad thing to happen to Gregg.
Right.
The evil one did that.
That's right.
But knowing that that was going to occur, he was able to shape and utilize that for his purposes, which is, you know, God works through other people.
That's right.
So when we're talking about organizations like Concerns of Police Survivors, Fraternal Order of Police, even our auxiliary at the local, state, and national levels, you know, the auxiliary's motto is never let them walk alone.
Yeah.
And it's God being able to work and through other people to bring healing, really, and restoration to the folks that have gone through this. And so here again now, I come back to you and I say, so what's that like for you? To know that he took all that drama and trauma, all that stuff, and he molded you into this to be able to do this. And really, it's not you. You're just a vessel that
Yep.
he's working through.
Yep.
What did that do for you on a faith level?
Well, I came back to God. You know, I told you I got very
Yeah.
angry at him and went through the drinking period. And after I quit the drinking period, I still was very angry at God. So it took about 18 months before I came back around and thought,
Sure.
okay, God, this happened. and what are you doing with me? Why?
There you go.
Yeah. What are you going to do? And that's why I say it became my calling. I had a very good pastor who would call me maybe once a month, maybe every other month. Was never pushy, was never anything other than understanding, and said, it's okay for you to be mad at God. It's okay. He gets it. Matter of fact,
He's a big God. He can handle it.
He knew you were going to be mad at him before you ever knew you were going to be mad at him.
That's right.
So you take your time. And if you decide to come back to church, you decide to come back to church. If you decide just to talk to God privately in your home, you do that privately in your home. You and God will work this out. But I'm just here as, a friend. I'm just here to tell you that there are things in the Bible that you should know and will pertain to you.
That's good.
And I was very blessed with that because he was able to help me start redirecting that anger into a positive manner of helping these survivors and helping the families.
You think
That's
about it,
awesome.
you hear the saying, hurt people, right? But a lot of times we leave out this part of healed people help with the healing of other people.
That's right.
Because they can relate, which is what's so powerful in the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ, is that God became man, human flesh, walked this out, and he can relate to what we're going through.
Yeah.
To the pain, to the persecution, to the trauma that you go through. He can relate. So you're praying to a God who can relate to to your humanity again.
We deal with the question a lot, especially in survivorship, of when bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Well, God can totally relate because there is no better good than Jesus the Christ.
Right.
And he offered himself up for all of sin and for every human being on our behalf.
Right.
Bad things happen to good Jesus, right?
Absolutely.
But he did that so that when bad things happen to good people here, he can walk us through it and help us know how to deal with it until eternity.
Yeah.
Herein is the power of Police Week, which you talked about. So that's coming up very soon. I think when this episode runs, we'll be leading into Police Week. It's one of the things that I always try to point out to folks and remind them of is that the reason why we honor our officers, the reason why our nation pauses is because you have women and men like Gregg who sacrifice themselves for their communities.
That's right.
And that sacrifice, which we call the supreme sacrifice, we give them a medal that says supreme sacrifice, is really representative of this ultimate sacrifice that Christ gave for all of us. And so I always remind folks, whether you're a believer or not, you're going and recognizing this ultimate sacrifice that has occurred through the supreme sacrifice of other women and men that you walk amongst. Right. And so, when we talk about, well, why does bad things happen to good people? Even in Gregg's sacrifice, I wish I'd gotten a chance to meet the dude.
I wish you could have too.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have.
That's right.
No.
Not just through you, but through your sons.
Yes.
And so that's the key. That's, again, relationship. And so you've got a heavenly Father that can bring all that about. Think about it. Yeah. Think about all the people that you probably would have never met, known.
You're right.
Touched their lives touched yours.
Right.
Without this event occurring.
And not just you, but Gregg through you.
That's right.
See, Gregg is still doing his ministry
he is.
On this planet through you and his sons that carry on to touch and minister to other people and love other people through their trauma. And that's what he did for his career and his calling every day that he went out was to help and love somebody through tragedy, through a car accident, through a domestic situation, through whatever he was dealing with on that day. And he's still doing that through the spirit of what you've done now. How many years has it been? How many years?
32 and a half.
Come on, girl. 32 and a half.
32 and a half.
So you look at that. That's why our survivors are so powerful. It's not just you.
Yeah.
It's your officer living on through you. And I think about you telling that story, him turning around to that door.
What a memorial.
And to me, that's him making sure that his love is in you.
Yeah.
You're right.
For you to then carry that out.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
How many
pretty
times
strong.
did you go back to that one moment
Oh.
of him at the door?
I couldn't tell
and
you
just
how many
grab
millions. And I have to share something else with you too. And in one of the conversations that I had with God, where I was angry,
Yeah.
you know, and I started making that turn, and I had told God, you know, this perpetrator took so much from me and my children that I refuse to let this perpetrator take our smiles and our good part of life.
Yeah.
And God, what is it you want me to do? And that's
Yeah.
why I say
That clicked.
it clicked. But it was also one of those things of where you have to talk to God. You really do. You have to lean on him.
And if you're a survivor right now and you're watching this program, turn to the Lord and ask him, how do you want to use this in my life? What do you want me to do? What's the call on my life?
That's right.
Reach out to Molly. I guess that'd be okay
That's-
for you, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Reach out to Molly. Let her know, or ask her, what can I do? That's powerful.
And the whole point in that, it goes back to these crosses that we hand out, right? That's the scene of the sacrifice.
That's right.
Right? and that's why when you're handing that to people, you're encouraging them to place their focus back on that, because
Correct.
that's the only place that our healing comes from. Try as you might, all these other things, as you shared, they don't fill that hole in you.
Correct.
And this is where that can happen. So when we're talking about Police Week, and you're talking about new survivors
Yes.
that are going out there, seasoned survivors that are going back as you do, or just the general public that maybe have never been to it, or a fellow officer that's never been, why is Police Week so important?
Police Week is the time where our nation's capital comes to a standstill and says, thank you for sharing your loved one with us. We honor him or her. We respect him and her, and we're going to honor the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So when you have National Police Week on May the 13th is the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Candlelight Service. You know, I share with everybody the powerfulness of this service is this is the only memorial in our nation's capital that will never ever be completed. Every year you have, 100 to 300 names being added of officers who have died the year before, or maybe historical deaths.
Point that out again. So this is a memorial that's in D.C., the District of Columbia.
Correct.
It's the only living memorial that remains in D.C.
Correct.
that continues to have names added
Correct.
to it. And as I shared, I think in a previous episode, just over the last year or so, we've added new blank panels to that wall for the first time.
We have.
Because we know we're going to add more and more names.
We will add more and more names. And the sad thing, you asked me about 9/11.
Yeah.
We are still paying respects,
Severe,
because there are still officers and firefighters and civilians who went into 9/11 to help, who are dying from the diseases they picked up from there.
I'll never forget one of the meetings that we were at together with some police officers from other states, and I was visiting with one of the New York officers there, and I said, "Well, brother, how are you doing? How's New York doing?" He looked at me and just simply said, "Well, Chaplain, we're dying."
Yeah.
That was it.
Oh, he's right.
But that you could feel that sense. And then he went on to explain what you just did, because of all the dust that was inhaled and all the chemicals that was inhaled fighting to help people survive all of those things, and civilians, and running to the scene instead of running away like everybody else was doing. And he said, we're dying.
But even if another 9/11 happened today, the same thing would happen. Those officers,
They would run.
those firefighters, they would all go running in, no mask, no anything, to
That's
help
right. None of them would say, "Nah, we went through this last time. I'm going
not
home
one
this
of them,
time."
because it takes somebody special to be a police
Yes, it
officer
does.
and a firefighter, public safety, period.
Well,
So
that's why I always try to point out to people that, you know, our police officers, firefighters too, our public servants like that are in public safety. They've all already laid down their life.
They have.
They laid down their life when they raised their right hand
That's
and
right.
took that solemn oath, that pledge, right?
that's right.
And in doing that, even when the line of duty death occurs, you know, I think that's why officers rally so much around that, is because we all know that the sacrifice was made way back when.
Right.
This is just the fulfillment of
That's
it.
right.
And that's why it's so special what occurs in Washington, D.C. This
It
is
is.
coming up. I always tell officers, as you said about survivors, you should go at least once when you don't have a line of duty.
That's right.
And you should also definitely go when you do have a line of duty death at your agency, because you're going to experience it in
That's
different ways. And then time and time again, what we see is officers who go back and say, now I, just like you, I got to be a part of
I'm
this
going to help.
and help make this happen. That's such a powerful thing.
It is very powerful, because they understand and their heart
There you
is
go.
in it,
Yeah.
and they want to make a difference, because unfortunately, especially on some of the small departments throughout the country, they don't have the resources. They don't have the ability
Right.
to get the families there or to get officers there. So when you have an officer from Indiana that is going back for the third time because now they want to help new families, and they put on those Class A's and they walk down that center aisle and they place the flower in the wreath and they honor the deceased officer. It's a very powerful.
Yes, it is.
It's just, you know, there's no words that describe
There
it,
are no
because
words, really.
to that officer that's placing that carnation is thinking, by the grace of God, you
Yep.
know, that's not me.
That's
Could be
right.
me, this could be my family.
That's right. And yet I'm here and I have the ability, again, I feel, for God to work through them,
Through me,
to
yep.
have the determination to go, because a lot of these officers who are there are on their own time.
Yeah.
They're on their own vacation or they're on unpaid days off.
Right.
So they're going to make a difference in someone else's world. And, you know, we've talked about this before. About every 52 hours, an officer is killed in the line of duty.
Yep.
So some point in time in your career, you will be affected by a line of duty death.
No doubt.
But it speaks volumes for you to go to Washington,
Yeah.
to be there for a family that you will never meet, you will never know. It's just, you know, that's what makes them special.
And like you said, on the 13th, you have the candlelight vigil,
Right.
which again, emblematic of your lighting a light in the middle of the darkness.
That's right.
Used to occur at the National Memorial Wall. Now it occurs on the Mall in Washington, D.C.
Correct.
Powerful visual.
And that is a wave of people.
Oh,
I
yes,
mean,
it
a
is.
sea of people.
Yes, it is.
And then 2 days later on the 15th, which is actually Police Memorial Day,
Right.
our nation pauses on the lawn of the Capitol building, the People's House. You're looking down that mall, right?
Yep.
Right.
And the nation pauses and not only honors the fallen officer, but that's the time where we really honor the family.
That's right.
As well.
That's right.
And that's why we talk about the white chairs. That's the white chairs are where the surviving family members sit.
That's right.
And it's such a powerful thing. We'll include some links at the bottom of this to the National
be
Law
super.
Enforcement Officer Memorial, which a lot of times will live stream the candlelight vigil. So
Correct.
if you're in law enforcement, you're not in law enforcement, but you want to be a part of it, you can.
Absolutely.
You can watch the live stream for the 13th. And then a lot of times the Fraternal Order of Police, the National, will live stream the FOP Memorial that's at
Correct.
the Capitol building. And C-SPAN will sometimes broadcast it, because a lot of times that's the event that the President of the United States will often come
Correct.
to and honor those families and the fallen.
Right.
And it's just a very humbling experience to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to see. What are some closing thoughts that you might have for folks watching
Well,
this?
a couple things I'd like to add, not only the 13th and the 15th, but what really will help that police officer and that surviving family member
Yeah.
is May 14 and 16, the 2 days of Concerns of Police Survivors Grief Seminars. Again, we're not sitting in a circle, crying, holding hands. You are sharing your story. You are hearing other people's story, and you are making lifelong relationships.
That's good.
So when you say survivor grief seminars, this isn't just family members. You said officers. So these are peer officers.
Children.
As well.
We have children. Yeah. We take them off site for 2 days. We'll take the children to FBI Quantico. And the officers who are going through Quantico right now will take their day and work with these children. We have volunteers from all over the country come in and work with the children. But you finally have survivors. When I say survivors, it's spouses, it's parents, it's siblings, it's children, it's police officers, it's it's everyone affected by a line of duty death. You are finally in a place where if you laugh and cry at the same time, no one's judging you. Mm-hmm. You are in an atmosphere where you're not being judged, but you can finally open up because that's where I finally found my hope to go forward because I was supposed to be okay in 12 months.
So here's the important point. Let's say you're an officer on an agency, you've lost an officer, you're helping to take the surviving family members to D.C. Don't get in the way of shortchanging those seminars. Sometimes family members say, I don't really want to do that. Right. And these aren't just spouses. These are moms, dads, sons, daughters, any family member. Make sure they take advantage of those and engage in that. And maybe even you, fellow officer, engage in those as well because you need it. You
do need it. And that's where you're going to get the resources to learn to go back home and put one foot in front of the other. You're going to learn that when the anniversary date comes, you're going to have bad days, but then you're still going to be able to pick up and move forward.
No doubt.
A couple last things that I'd like to add, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
That I feel are important to me, and I feel maybe important to some survivors out there because they're in this situation.
Right.
The perpetrator that killed Gregg received the death penalty, and so he was executed for what he did to Gregg. But what was important for me is that I met with this perpetrator before he was executed because he was the last person in this world to be with Gregg when Gregg was alive. He was in the squad car with Gregg, and it was important for me to know what happened in that car.
Wow.
So for any survivor, and I have them call me all the time, any survivor that's in that position, if your heart is telling you you need to meet with that perpetrator, you will have people who mean well, and they do mean well, that will tell you, don't do that. Don't give that person your time of day. Don't do this. Don't do that. You have to, because that's part of your healing process.
Yeah. Wow.
And then to be there through the execution and to have the family there and the officers there, that, as strange as it may seem, is still part of the healing process.
Sure.
You have to fight each step that you take when you hit a milestone. Right. You just have to fight through it. And you have to listen to your heart because I believe God is talking to you and God is telling you what you need, not what someone else needs, but what you need to get you through this tragedy.
And I want to help somebody that might be thinking, but I'm supposed to forgive and I'm supposed to let it go and I'm supposed to, let me help you with something. Jesus Christ himself did not deliver the men that were to be executed for their crimes hanging beside of him on either side. He did deliver the one from hell and say, this day you'll be with me in paradise. But they both went into eternity, and Jesus did not stop their execution. They were both executed while he was giving his life for salvation of the world. Don't ever forget that. So forgiveness just means in your heart you've dropped the charges, but for that person to pay the penalty for the crime they committed against another human being in that severity is not out of order. It's not wrong, and it doesn't mean that you're living your life in unforgiveness.
Right.
You have released that man to the Lord, and you let his destiny play out and be what it should have been. And so
that's pretty much the conversation I had with him, because he asked me if I could forgive him, and he wrote a letter to me and my children. And I told him, I said, I will never forget, but I forgave you a long time ago because I'm not letting you take anything else from us.
Come on, there you go.
When you die, you're not standing in front of me and explaining yourself. You're standing in front of God. So you have to decide what's important to you. My forgiveness is not important to you in my eyes. God's forgiveness is. So you have to think about that.
There you go. That just helps somebody. I know that just helps somebody today.
So yeah, I mean, here again, I just encourage you to stay focused on that. That, you know, what you're able to do, those are seeds that are planted, and then when they grow forth, even in pain, they can benefit other people. Yep. And it's not just you; it's so many that walk through this valley, whatever their valley may be, that, you know, you can get bogged down, you can get lost in there, but God will help pull you out, and He'll send people to help pull you out as well, and then walk out the calling that He puts on you through that.
That's right.
What a great testimony.
Well, I had people in the beginning send me anonymous mail that said, "Oh my gosh, your kids are now considered orphans. Oh my gosh, you're a widow. Oh my gosh, kids from a single parent household are more apt to grow up to be bad kids." You know, maybe it gave me a little more determination. Maybe it didn't. Right. But God was with us through this whole period. And I have to brag. My children are good, Christian-loving men. They are doing well.
Come on,
you
Mama.
know, they remember their dad and they honor him as well.
And you did a great job. We're very proud of you. We love you dearly.
And let's remember one thing. We started this off and kind of jokingly and in jest, but really talking about God sending another man to you as well.
That's right.
That's helped raise those boys.
Right.
That's right.
That's poured into them.
That's right. We are very blessed with Jeff, because I got to say hi to Jeff earlier.
That's right.
So you think here's a man that has jumped in to walk alongside you through all this as well, and there's a purpose in all of that. So
now, how many years before you met Jeff and the two of you?
About 20.
Got married?
About 20, because we've been married for 12 years.
So for the person that said 12 months, you missed it.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I think just a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
well, we're very proud of you.
Thank you so much
you.
for being willing to share with not just us, but everybody that's going to watch this. I'll guarantee you that this is no accident either, and God's going to use your circumstances to help bless other people and help encourage them as well.
That's all I can pray for and hope for. And I want to just tell you guys, this really means a lot to be able to share Gregg's story, my story, Jeff's story, Kyle and Brock's story, all of us. So,
that's right.
Just thank you for honoring Gregg and his legacy.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Hey, we're so thankful today to have Molly with us, and Rick and I just appreciate all that she does for survivors and what she continues to do with her life. But we're thankful for you too. Thanks for checking out Remnant Revealed. Please subscribe, hit the thumbs up. We do this totally for love's sake. We owe no man anything but to love him, and we love every one of you. So
and share this with other
absolutely,
folks.
Man. Somebody needs this. You know they do. And there'll be some links at the end of the video. Please check those out. And Molly, thank you so much for being with us. Rick, as always, I love you, my friend. Thanks for being here today and doing this with me.
This was good stuff.
Good stuff. Hit that bell. Hit that bell. See you soon. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Rick and I trust that you heard something that will help your life. And if you believe that it would help others, please make sure and share. Like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you can be notified when the next podcast is available. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.